The city of Lagos never truly sleeps, even long after dusk. Its skyline burned with ambition. Towers of glass and chrome shimmering over restless streets, where the hum of generators, the chatter of night hawkers, and the occasional blare of a danfo horn created a kind of music only Lagosians could understand. High above it all, in the 37th floor of the Arinze Holdings Tower, Bill Arinze sat alone in his office. The room was large, sleek, and cold, the kind of space designed to impress, not comfort. Floor-to-ceiling glass offered a sweeping view of Victoria Island, but Bill barely looked at it. He was leaning back in his chair, one hand resting on a tumbler of scotch, the other on a stack of reports he'd long stopped reading. For all the noise and energy that made Lagos pulse, Bill's world had grown quiet. Too quiet. At 51, he was everything they said he would be, a man who had climbed from a crowded two-room apartment in Surulere to owning real estate from Dubai to New York. He had the press calling him Nigeria's silent lion, a man of power, wealth, and impossible discipline. But beneath all the polish, he carried a certain emptiness, a hollow in his chest that no boardroom victory ever filled. He was staring blankly at a document when a soft sound drew his attention, a faint clatter of a cleaning bucket, the sound of metal on marble. Bill frowned slightly. It was past 10 p.m. The cleaners usually finished hours earlier. He turned his head toward the far end of the corridor. Through the slightly open glass door, he caught a glimpse of movement. A young woman, bent slightly, wringing a mop into a small metal bucket. At first, there was nothing remarkable about her. She was in the plain navy uniform the cleaning contractors used, her hair tied neatly under a scarf, face bare of makeup. But something about her, something caught his attention. It wasn't just her quiet focus or the care with which she worked. It was the grace in her movement, deliberate, unhurried, as if the world outside her mop and bucket didn't exist. Bill watched for a few seconds longer than he intended to. Then he cleared his throat and stood. "Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but calm. The woman froze. Slowly she turned toward him, startled. Her eyes, large, clear, and steady, met his. For a brief moment something passed between them. A flicker, soft and strange. "Yes, sir," she said quickly, straightening. Her accent was distinctly Eastern, Igbo like his own, though softened by city life. Bill nodded toward the glass door. "It's late. Why are you still here?" "I had to finish the executive floor, sir," she replied. Her voice was quiet but confident. "The others left early. I don't like leaving things halfway." He raised a brow. There was something disarmingly honest about the way she said it. "What's your name?" "Adora, sir." "Adora." He repeated it slowly, as though testing the sound. "You work with the cleaning contractors?" "Yes, sir. Part-time. Night shift." He gave a small nod, slipping his hands into his pockets. "I see." For reasons he couldn't quite explain, he didn't walk away. He stood there, watching as she dipped the mop again, the gentle rhythm of her motion oddly soothing. "Do you always clean this late?" he asked after a while. "Only when the workload is heavy," she replied without looking up. "I don't mind. It keeps me busy." Her tone was respectful but not timid, a rare balance that caught his attention again. Most people spoke to him either with awe or fear. She spoke like someone who had learned to carry dignity quietly, without demanding anyone notice. Bill turned, about to head back to his desk, but then he noticed her hand tremble slightly as she reached for the bucket. He frowned. "You're shaking," he said. "Are you all right?" Adora hesitated, then gave a faint smile. "It's just the cold, sir." The air conditioner upstairs doesn't take pity on cleaners. For the first time in what felt like months, Bill laughed. A quiet, genuine sound that startled even him. "Point taken," he said, moving toward the thermostat on the wall. He turned it down a few degrees. "Thank you, sir," she said, her eyes softening. He waved it off, pretending not to notice the warmth that stirred in his chest. "You shouldn't have to freeze while working," he muttered. "I'll speak to maintenance tomorrow." She nodded. "That's very kind, sir." For a long moment, the room settled into a comfortable silence. The air felt different now. Not cold, not tense, just alive. Bill returned to his desk, pretending to refocus on the report in front of him. But his mind had wandered elsewhere, to the quiet girl mopping marble floors under the dim glow of city lights. He didn't usually notice stuff, not out of arrogance, but habit. Years of wealth had built invisible walls around him, yet somehow this girl had walked right through them without even trying. When he finally looked up again, Adora was gathering her things. "Good night, sir," she said softly from the doorway. "Good night, Adora," he replied, her name again, like a note he wasn't ready to stop hearing. She paused briefly, then offered a faint smile and left. When the door closed behind her, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same anymore. Bill leaned back in his chair, staring at the reflection of his own face in the glass window. And for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't just alone. He was curious. The next morning came with the usual symphony of Lagos ambition, car horns, chatter, and the low hum of the city's energy seeping through the glass walls of Arinze Holdings Tower. Bill arrived early, as always. His assistant, Angela, was already waiting with a tablet in hand, and the day's schedule neatly arranged. "Good morning, sir," she said briskly. "You have a meeting with the Minister of Commerce at 10, and the board wants your feedback on the Dubai expansion proposal before then." Bill gave a faint nod. "Leave the documents on my desk. I'll review them in an hour." Angela hesitated for a second. "You were here late again last night, weren't you, sir?" He glanced at her, one brow raised. "You've started tracking my sleep now." She smiled lightly. "Just concerned. You work too much." Bill waved it off, moving toward the window. "Work keeps me sane." What he didn't say was that for the first time in years, something other than work had held his attention the night before. Something as small and strange as a young woman with a mop and an unassuming grace that had refused to leave his mind. He found himself asking a question he hadn't asked in decades. Who is she really? That evening, when the office began to empty and the night cleaners trickled in again, Bill found himself waiting. He told himself it was coincidence, that he just happened to be reviewing financials late again. But deep down, he knew better. At 9:47 p.m., the soft clatter returned, the same faint rhythm of metal and water against tile. Adora. She was there again, this time on the far side of the corridor, quietly dusting the framed photographs of company milestones. Her movements were unhurried, her expression calm, but her eyes, those eyes, carried a quiet intelligence that felt far older than her years. Bill stood by his office door, watching her reflection in the glass wall. "Adora," he said gently. She turned, startled again, though less so than the night before. "Good evening, sir." "You're working late again?" "Yes, sir. I swapped shifts with one of the others." "Why?" She hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "I prefer the quiet hours, fewer people. I can think." Bill tilted his head. "Think about what?" Adora gave a small laugh, the kind that sounded like she wasn't used to being asked personal questions by billionaires. "Life, sir. How to make it better, how to keep moving forward." Something in her tone pulled at him. It wasn't self-pity. It was strength, quiet, grounded, and familiar in a way he couldn't name. He gestured toward the open door. "You can finish here," he said. "The air outside the hallway is better. I'll keep the light on." "Thank you, sir." She worked silently, and Bill returned to his chair, but this time he didn't pretend to read. He simply watched her reflection through the glass, the mop gliding across the polished marble, her slender figure moving with rhythm and focus. There was something about her that unsettled him, not attraction in the crude sense, but a deep pull, as though she belonged somewhere in his life story, only he couldn't recall the page. When she finally gathered her things, Bill spoke again. "How long have you been with the cleaning service?" 6 months, she said. "It helps pay for school." "You're studying?" "Yes, sir. Accounting, University of Lagos, part-time." Bill's brow lifted slightly. "Ambitious?" She smiled faintly. "I like numbers. They tell the truth, even when people don't." That made him pause. "You sound like someone who's seen a lot." She looked at him then, really looked, and said quietly, "Everyone has, sir. Some of us just don't talk about it." Bill felt a weight in his chest at that, the kind that came when someone said something simple yet devastatingly true. He nodded slowly. "You're wise for your age." She smiled, shy but steady. "My mother used to say that too." "Your mother must be proud." Her eyes softened, then dimmed slightly. "She passed away a few years ago." Bill felt a sharp twinge, unexpected and strangely personal. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Thank you, sir." She said it simply, without bitterness or sadness, and resumed cleaning. When she finally left the office that night, Bill stayed seated long after, her words echoing in the silence. Something in them had stirred memories he'd buried long ago, of a younger version of himself, of mistakes, of love lost in the rush of ambition. Days turned into weeks. Bill noticed he began scheduling late nights more often, subconsciously aligning his hours with Adora's. Angela noticed too, though she said nothing at first. Then one evening, as Bill dismissed his staff and prepared to stay behind again, Angela paused at his doorway. "Sir," she said carefully, "may I ask something personal?" Bill looked up from his laptop. "Since when do you need permission?" Angela smiled slightly. "You've been different lately. Less impatient, more distracted. Should I be worried?" He leaned back amused. "Do I look like a man who gets distracted?" She raised a brow. "Maybe not before. But now, I think something, or someone, has your attention." Bill chuckled softly. "You've been watching too many office dramas." Angela tilted her head. "Maybe. Or maybe I just notice when my boss looks like he's remembering what it means to feel." He stared at her for a moment, then gave a dry smile. "Careful, Angela. You're starting to sound like my conscience." She laughed. "Someone has to." When she left, Bill found himself staring out the window again, at the shimmering sea of lights below. Lagos at night was a strange mirror, beautiful, alive, and full of ghosts. It was nearly midnight when the elevator doors opened again. Adora stepped out, her bucket in one hand, a small portable speaker in the other, playing a soft tune by Asher. The melancholy melody floated through the hall, filling the space between silence and memory. Bill rose slowly from his chair, drawn again like a moth to a quiet flame. When Adora noticed him, she reached to turn off the music, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't think anyone was still here." Bill shook his head. "No need. It's beautiful." She smiled, surprised. "You listen to Asher, sir?" "Used to," he said. "A long time ago." The song faded, leaving behind a silence thick with something unspoken. "Adora," Bill said after a long pause, "do you ever feel like life brings people back to you? By accident?" She looked at him, her brows knitting slightly. "I don't believe in accidents, sir. Only timing." He exhaled slowly, nodding. "Timing. Neither of them spoke again, but in that quiet, something shifted, an invisible thread tightening between two lives that had been apart too long.
For 2 weeks, Bill tried to explain it away, the way his gaze seemed to search for Adora whenever he heard footsteps in the corridor, the way her soft laughter lingered in his memory longer than boardroom figures or corporate forecasts. He told himself it was curiosity, maybe admiration, but never once did he admit to himself that he was drawn, not until the night it became undeniable. It was a Friday, the last one before the company's annual charity gala. The building was unusually quiet. Most of the executives had already gone home to prepare for the event. Bill stayed back, as usual, and so did she. He had been reviewing files when he heard the faint sound of humming again. A tune carried softly down the corridor. This time it wasn't Asher. It was older, gentler. He couldn't place it, but it stirred something in him, a memory long buried beneath years of distance and regret. He stood, pushing away from the desk, and followed the sound. Adora was kneeling by the large portrait near the conference room, the one of his late mother, draped in an elegant aquete wrapper, her smile eternalized in oil paint. Adora was dusting the frame with careful strokes, humming as she worked. Bill hesitated before speaking. "You know that song?" She turned slightly, surprised but smiling. "My mother used to sing it when I was little," she said. She said it was her favorite from her school days in Enugu. Bill's heart gave a small, sudden jolt. Enugu. He walked closer, his steps measured. "You're from Enugu?" "Yes, sir." She stood now, hands clasped in front of her. "Born there. My mother and I moved to Lagos when I was 10. He nodded slowly, trying to keep his voice even. "And your mother? What was her name?" "Beatrice," Adora said, her smile softening. "Beatrice Naji." The name landed like a whisper in a cathedral, quiet but thunderous. Bill froze, his throat went dry, and for a moment, the polished room around him seemed to blur. Beatrice. He hadn't heard that name in over 2 decades. "Sir?" Adora's voice was gentle, unaware of the storm she had just awakened in him. Bill blinked, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Forgive me. That name just sounds familiar. I knew a Beatrice once, a long time ago." Adora tilted her head slightly. "Really? Maybe it's a coincidence." "Maybe," he murmured, but his pulse betrayed him. He could feel it, the old ache clawing at the edges of his composure. He retreated slightly, turning toward the window to hide the tremor in his hands. "You said she passed away?" Adora nodded quietly. "Yes, sir. Heart condition. It was sudden. She never liked hospitals." Bill closed his eyes briefly. Beatrice had hated hospitals. He remembered her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she had teased him the last time they spoke, before he boarded that flight to London 24 years ago. He had promised to return. He never did. And now, standing just a few feet away, was this young woman, graceful, smart, calm, whose eyes held the same softness, whose smile curved the same way Beatrice's once had. It couldn't be. It couldn't. "Sir," Adora said softly, pulling him back to the present. "Are you all right?" He nodded quickly, too quickly. Yes, I'm fine. Just tired." She gave him a small, worried look. "You should rest, sir. You work too hard." He managed a chuckle. "So I've been told." For the rest of the night, he said little. Adora finished her work quietly and left just before midnight, her soft perfume lingering faintly in the air, a mix of soap and something floral. When the door closed behind her, Bill sank into his chair, heart pounding. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he hadn't touched in years, and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside lay a few old photographs, faded, curled at the edges. There she was, Beatrice, smiling in front of Nsuka's art department building, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, a pose he hadn't thought twice about then. Bill's hand trembled slightly. "No," he whispered to himself, "it can't be." But even as he said it, he knew the truth was circling him like smoke, impossible to ignore for long. The following Monday, he called Angela into his office. "Do me a favor," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Find out which cleaning agency handles our night contracts. I want a full profile, workers, background checks, the lot." Angela blinked. "Sir, is there a problem?" "No problem," Bill said. "Just a compliance review." She nodded. though her expression said she didn't quite believe him. By noon, she returned with a neatly printed file. Bill took it, closed the door, and sat behind his desk. He scanned the names quickly until his eyes stopped. Adora Naji, age 23. Address, Surulairai. Emergency contact, none. Mother's name, Beatrice Anaji, deceased. His heart clenched. It was all there. The missing years, the unanswered questions, the shape of a life that could have been part of his own. He leaned back, pressing his palm against his forehead. My God, he whispered. But the words wouldn't come. He thought of Adora's eyes again. The warmth, the calm, the quiet dignity. Beatrice's eyes. All at once, the air in the room felt heavy. How was he supposed to face her now? How was he supposed to tell her the truth? That the man who had asked her name, who had watched her mop his floor, who had felt drawn to her for reasons he didn't understand, was the father she'd never met? He didn't know. All he knew was that fate had brought him to this point for a reason, and it wouldn't let him rest until he faced it. That evening, for the first time, Bill left the office early. He needed air. He needed answers. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew where to find them, in Enugu, where it had all begun.